Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of the Day Zero podcast. I'm Spectre. With me is Z. Not with us is Anti. He had some previous arrangements. Um, you may notice that our Discord icons aren't really moving at the moment. That's because there's a bit of a issue with Streamlabs. So,
Well, with a
our
StreamKit, like
or
Discord,
StreamKit. Sorry, yeah,
Discord provides us the overlay, and their whole StreamKit stuff is down, so you just get to stare at the two static images for this stream.
yep. And also on top of that, this will be our last stream for a little while, for a few months. Z's going on a trip around the world. No, not really. He's going on a hike. So we are going to be continuing the podcast. We've done 10 episodes. We like where it's going, so we're going to continue doing it. It's just that Z had this previous commitment before we started up the podcast. So
Yeah, I'll toss on there. Like, I'll be gone if things go well. I'll be gone for 5 to 6 months. During that time, I mean, we talked about what we do. We wanted to kind of keep the podcast going, but just ended up deciding that maybe it wasn't best to just have Spectre monologuing. It would be a significant change to the style. So
yeah,
since I've had this planned, I mean, we like kind of how the podcast is done. We've shown at least to ourselves that's something we can routinely do. It's something we'll definitely keep up. But yeah, for this next period, since I had already planned to be leaving, I'm not going to stick around just for the podcast. And I mean, if things don't go well for me, maybe I'll be back in just a month.
yeah, just like the last couple of years.
Well, I mean, I've stayed out for longer, but yeah, I've had injuries within the first couple months.
Yeah. So, this will be our last episode for a little while. But like Z said, we do plan to try to put out other media. Also, we're going to be trying to do like a blog. We'll put out a link to that, later on when we get more posts on there. We'll post it on like the Twitter and stuff like that. So
Yeah, and
um,
hopefully we'll see some YouTube media coming out.
yeah,
Less streaming content and more just video content, more just other content, I guess is what we'll say.
yeah, we'll leave it at that for now. We'll get more into it when it gets closer towards that. Um, so yeah, just follow Twitter for updates on stuff like that. And yeah, so I guess we can, head out of the meta discussion and go into the you took a course. You're back
Yeah,
at school.
I mean, to be fair, I took the course less because I felt like I really needed this training, and more just out of an interest out of one, what they're actually teaching for the course itself and the quality of the certification. So yeah, I recently kind of I took the course actually a couple months ago, but they just opened the exam up for registration. The offensive security web expert, I think, is what they're calling the certification. The course is their
Yeah,
advanced web
OSWE.
attacks and
Yeah.
exploitation. So as you can guess by the name, it's a course focused on web attacks and exploitation. In terms of like the content coverage, so there is a syllabus actually on towards the end of the page. There's a syllabus link that you can kind of see exactly what's being covered. In fact,
Okay.
I'm just going to open that now. That way I don't necessarily share anything I shouldn't about what's covered. So one
That's
thing
fair.
is, offensive security is pretty tight-lipped on what information they kind of let get out about anything. So if you're caught sharing more information than you should about the course, about the exam, they'll just basically invalidate your certification and
Ban you from getting any
yeah,
more.
ban you from getting it, potentially even ban the company like that you worked for from getting certifications. Or at least I've
Ooh,
heard that. I haven't
I didn't
actually
know it
seen
was
that
that steep.
confirmed. But yeah, so of course I don't want to cause any problems. But essentially, I mean, the in terms of the course content, I'll just say it's kind of meh. It covers, a few of the important topics. Obviously, cross-site scripting's in there. It doesn't really cover, like, it expects you to more or less know about cross-site scripting already. Blind SQL injection, some remote code execution stuff, and serialization attacks are basically the gist of the course. So coverage is like, yeah, okay, it covers some things, but there's gaps between that. Like, which I can kind of forgive, just given that it is an advanced, or supposed to be an advanced course. So yeah, okay. So there's some gaps in it because they're just covering kind of the higher level in terms of difficulty techniques. They're not trying to introduce you to absolutely everything. What disappointed me was the lack of SSRF, any sort of server-side request forgery stuff, which is kind of an up-and-coming area, but they do include serialization attacks, which I was pleasantly surprised to see, which is kind of the hot topic right now, with the Jackson data bind vulnerabilities, and a lot more of those are being found just with serialization. So it's nice to see that covered here. So I know they kind of gave this whole course a bit of a revamp in the last couple years, but the course itself is fairly old. I don't know if the serialization stuff was included when they started with the course, or if that's been added now, or what. I kind of went into it expecting it to be fairly old, and I mean, yeah, a lot of the stuff is still kind of old, but I mean, there's value in just kind of having everything together for you. There's gaps. I mean, the content of the the quality of the teachings, it's reasonable. Like, I didn't feel like they taught anything poorly. There are free places that you can go to learn all this. Like, there's no reason why you need this course.
Outside of the cert. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll touch on the cert. But, like, in terms of the course, in terms of learning from it, like, it doesn't have a lab environment like OSCP does, where you kind of have this big open environment where you can just have a bunch of applications that are vulnerable, and you have to find the vulns, you have to find out how to exploit them, and like work your way in.
Oh,
this just has the exploits that are mentioned here, so like the app mail server appliance. I think they mentioned ATutor above. Like, they just have, the lab is just some servers running these for you to try exactly the attacks that are described in the course content in the lab. There's no mystery, there's no discovery. You're just doing it all kind of exactly as it's shown in the course content. So that, I think, is a huge kind of downside to the course. And it's the same with OSCE, and I'm going to assume that OSEE, their exploit, those are their two other binary exploit courses, are kind of the same way. The lab doesn't include this big thing like OSCP does. So that's, I mean, if they had that, that would actually make this extremely valuable, I think, having that sort of lab environment.
Yeah.
The lack of it, though, it kind of just leaves me thinking, you know, you could basically take this course material, look up these same exploits, and do it yourself.
Okay, so I was about to ask, you know, certificate aside, do you think the course is worth their asking price, which is like $1,400 or whatever? And I'm guessing from what you said, it's probably going to be a no.
Well, I mean, it really depends on the person. There's always that benefit to having everything already set up for you. You don't need to do any of the legwork when you go through the course. They have it set up. They have it set up exactly the right way for you to be able to follow along with them. No guesswork, no need to figure things out, no need to manage your own mail server for one of them. There's a huge benefit to that. If somebody feels that the cost is worthwhile, to not needing to do that legwork, like it teaches things fine. The quality of the teaching content is not bad at all.
Okay.
I mean, so it can be worthwhile. Personally, for me, for the course itself, I wouldn't. But at the same time, I've also been doing this for, you know, the better part of a decade. I mean, this wasn't anything new to me anyhow.
That's fair. So that is kind of a bit of a bias as to, like, you know, it wasn't going to be as useful for you from the start, right? Where you've already done it for.
Yeah, but even imagining if I were new and learning, I still don't know if I wouldn't want to drop the money off, period, just because it is. Like, I mean, it's a reasonable price. I don't think they're asking, like, I mean, it's not a SANS course. They're not asking, like, $6,000 for it. I can give them that benefit. The pricing is fair if you think there's going to be that value. There are kind of free resources, but on that note, I actually really struggle because obviously I've kind of, because this is a really new exam, really new course, I've tried to open myself up to have questions asked on Reddit and stuff. And the one thing I've kind of come across is I don't really have any recommendations for these types of issues, like on books or anything like that you can go to. I mean, normally there's the Web Application Hackers Handbook. That would be my go-to recommendation for pretty much everything web. The nice thing about this course, though, is it's really focused more or less on like specific attacks that you can do and more on chaining things, on building an exploit that's specific to the application you're targeting. So rather than just like, here's blind SQL injection, here's, an RCE attack, here's some little trick with zip files or something. It's, here's the XSS. Now, how can you use that to, say, introduce a vulnerability elsewhere by modifying, configurations, or leaking sensitive information through one means or another. It has a lot of chained attacks, which I think are kind of interesting. Think like LFI to RCE style attacks, where you're kind of taking one issue, chaining it to get something much more severe. And so the fact they've done the legwork here to find some good vulnerabilities to show some of these things, like, there's value in that. I definitely won't say there's no value to the course. And I struggle to actually come with recommendations besides paying attention to actual vulnerabilities out there and just experience. To me, a big part of it is just having some experience trying to attack the applications, and you just kind of pick up on like, oh yeah, you could chain things. Like, now that you have this, you just start seeing it, which is basically just how I learned, which is experience.
Oh yeah, like the hands-on, like trying to struggle through it and stuff is a lot more valuable than I think some people realize.
Yeah, which, I mean, the lab gives you some of that. That's where I think having a blind lab where you don't know the vulnerabilities going into it, though, would make the course much more valuable if it had that OSCP style lab.
Yeah, definitely.
So just for anybody, or sorry, you have a question. I'll let you ask that.
Oh no, that's okay. You can continue. I'll talk after your.
Okay. I was just going to mention, for anybody that has or isn't familiar, so I haven't actually done OSCP despite talking about it. I've known a good number of people who have. It's probably Offensive Security's most popular course and certification. And what they have is this huge lab environment. So the course itself is kind of network pen testing. It covers like a little bit of web, a little bit of binary, but like super basic level. Think, the simplest SQL injections or very straightforward buffer overflows, and mostly just using existing vulnerabilities. But they have this huge lab of like 50 machines or something, probably more. I don't know the number. But they have a large lab environment where you don't know how to get into all these boxes, but you're expected to break into them just by using kind of the methodology they teach and stuff. And that, I think, is hugely valuable for somebody trying to learn that stuff. So the fact that this certification doesn't have that, and I don't think any of their other certifications actually have that style of lab, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we can take a look, just a quick look to see, because I think they do directly mention if it has a lab or not.
Well, so all of them have a lab. It's just that the lab isn't like the lab in OSCP.
Oh, okay.
So, like, all of them do have a lab environment that you get access to. But in the case of this course, the Advanced Web Exploit course, the lab was just running the machines, or just running the software that he knew was vulnerable from the course material. It wasn't running anything new. It wasn't running anything for you to attack blind.
Yeah.
And that would kind of be my biggest issue. I know OSCE is exactly the same way, as is OSWP. Their Wi-Fi course.
Their waifu course.
Well, they call it WIFU, if you actually look.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow, okay. I thought you were making a bit of a joke there.
No, actually, if you take a look here at their online courses, it's...
Oh, yeah, they do call
wireless attacks.
That wasn't by accident.
But, no, I have been, generally speaking, only OSP really has a big lab. I feel like that's definitely a challenge in terms of the cost. I mean, again, like I've said before, the course quality is fine. I just think getting experience, play some CTFs, whatever. You can learn a lot of this already. Look at the syllabus, look at the exploits yourself too, is also an option.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, that you get through Offensive Security isn't just the course. Possibly more valuable is a certification. They've taken years to kind of get to the place where they're at now. So I initially took OSCE back in like 2014 or 2015, one of the two. And I mean, that at that time, it was like the hype had already been established that OSCP was a cert that you kind of want to grab for breaking into information security. I don't really care about network pen testing. I'm more into the exploit stuff. So I took a look at OSC back then, and I mean, I was like my OS ID when you kind of pass. Or I think when you register, you get an ID that's basically just an integer incrementing. Was in the low tens of thousands.
Okay.
Like I was in the teens, basically. Now I think they're up in like the 50,000s. So like in the last few years, they've grown a heck of a lot more than they grew in those first years before I had taken a look at it.
Yeah, so I do have a bit of a question about that, though. You might have more insight on this than I. How valuable is the cert in the industry?
So
Like,
if
is
you can break up the industry into a few different areas, like red teaming would be one area, network pen testing, and like application specific pen testing or AppSec. I mean, you could break things down yet further, physical, and yeah, if you want to start including the defensive side of things too. So OSCP is very much an entry level network pen testing certification. It deals a little bit with like your application style attacks, but like the big idea with that one is like it's meant for your entry level pen tester, and it's just that it's an entry level pen testing certification. You're not really getting a job because you have it. And that I think would be true of this one also, but I'll touch on that a little bit later. But in general, on the offensive side of security, certifications are not the big deal.
okay.
They can help, especially if you have like nothing else to really point to. I mean, if you haven't gone and published any CVs, if you don't have any under your belt, if you don't have like any CTF wins or even just part of a team, any write ups or anything like that, if you don't have anything else, okay, a cert can help. Although to be fair, like if I were to apply somewhere for like AppSec style testing, which is most of what I do, I wouldn't want to list OSCP on it.
Just because you have other things that are more
Well, I was going to
important.
say because OSCP is extremely entry level and network pen testing, whereas I'm more on the AppSec side. I'm more like finding ODAs, not just using them.
Okay, I see.
So OSCP has a mixed reputation, like better than nothing. But I know the co-founder of Mezzano Security. I don't know if I'm actually saying that right. I've only ever really read their name. But they did like oh, what was it? A micro corruption CTF. They're the guys that made that.
Yeah.
Co-founder there said like if he sees OSCP on someone's resume, it knocks them down a little bit. And the
Huh.
big thing on that is just because it's pen testing and not AppSec. Like there is a difference. A lot of people kind of think, oh, it's all hacking, it's all the same. There's definitely a difference between those who are doing like the app specific tests primarily and those that are doing network pen testing. There's an overlap for sure, but there is a difference.
Yeah,
And
the pen testing is a lot more tool usage. It's a
with
lot
tool
more like
usage, like
automated and stuff
in
like
pen
that.
testing, you just, and this is where there's kind of a difference. There are some pen tests that really do get to dive in more. But I mean, generally, a pen tester being hired by company X to look at their entire network and find the issues. They're not going to be able to patch, some random piece of software that you find an ODA in. It's just that's not what they're hiring you to find. They want you to find issues that they can actually fix and things they can do.
Mhm.
Whereas, on the AppSec side, we're being hired maybe by the company that developed the application to find an issue or to find issues. So that's going to be things they can patch, and we're less concerned about the deployment style issues, the configuration, and all of that. More just issues that exist in their code base because that's what they can fix. They can't control how a customer's deploying it. So they're two very different areas. There's an absolute overlap in them, but they are different areas. And OSCP, just because it is such a basic coverage in terms of the app side, can hurt. Generally, I'd argue, it's better than nothing, and the respect level for OSCP has only been growing over the years.
Yeah.
That said, talking about this course in particular,
Hmm.
uh, I really liked the exam. It definitely Like when I was doing the course, I'm like, well, I mean, I don't care too much about it. Doing the exam though, I actually have a bit of respect for this certification, more so than OSCP or OSCE.
Okay.
That said, I mean, one thing we did want to talk about is the proctoring aspect. This course is one of them that gets a proctored exam. I'm not
Yeah.
sure why I wasn't proctored. I actually got a little bit worried after I submitted the exam, and I'm like, I look online, see people talking about it being proctored and all that. I'm like, well, I didn't. I definitely didn't start the software to be proctored during this exam, and none of my resources indicated that I needed to do that. So I was a little bit worried. I did pass the exam, even though I didn't do that. So I wasn't proctored. That might have just been because I had signed up before it was publicly accessible. I got in while it's still beta.
Yeah.
So that's at least my guess. Though with that, I mean, there have been some people who really don't like the proctoring aspect. If you're not familiar, essentially, offensive security now wants everybody to essentially have their camera on facing them while they're doing the exam, and I believe also screen sharing. And I mean,
Yeah.
there's no audio with the camera. It's not sending, or at least it's not supposed to be sending any audio. They can't hear you. But the idea is just, to prevent cheating.
Yeah, so I did want to bring that up a little bit just in regards to the cert, because I have heard that there has been a lot of cheating has become a lot more popular on the the offensive security certs, and that's why they
Yeah,
felt they needed
definitely
to do
on
the
the
proctoring.
OSCP cert, it has. And I imagine this cert will kind of get there too. And yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah,
just people that will uh, either just share answers or have somebody else legitimately just take the exam for them.
yeah, which
I
was
think
hurting
it's
the reputation of the cert a little bit.
Yeah, I
So this
think
might
it's
help that.
less common among OSCE and OSE. One E, since that requires the physical presence, and OSC. I don't know. Maybe it is now, but actually, I did find that somebody had actually uploaded the exam binary onto hack forums. I don't think it's up anymore, but somebody was asking for help with the exam binary on hack forums. But yeah, so I mean, it's generally there just to kind of prevent people from having somebody else take the exam or using tools that they shouldn't. They do restrict, like, you can't use like auto pwn on OSCP to automatically pwn everything. They
Yeah,
have a similar restriction on the advanced web attacks one here, but generally, a lot of the tools just wouldn't have been useful anyhow. So it's less about that. So, I mean, it is an open book exam. Like, you can Google whatever you want.
what I'm wondering is, what if you if you ask for help without directly mentioning that it's for the course, like, if you go into like a Discord, like a programming Discord, or whatever, and you just have friends who do pen testing and stuff, and you message them saying, can you help me with this, but you don't mention that it's for the cert or whatever. Like, if I guess they can't really detect that.
Well, they could, though, because they could screen sharing.
That's true. So I wonder
Um,
if there is a clear defined rule about talking to people. Like, you can Google it, but Googling it is different than directly
yeah,
having
well,
a
I don't
conversation with
know.
someone.
I mean, we can take a look. That I think they mentioned something about um, you're supposed to take the exam alone, so they don't. Oh, this is just the blog post. There's an actual FAQ page about proctoring. Maybe it's on here.
Yeah, I'm just curious because it does seem like there's a bit of a gray area there where you can.
Well, I don't think that. I'm just looking here. Like, my guess would be that they wouldn't really support you actually asking for somebody to help you specifically on an exam challenge. I mean,
Yeah,
that
probably not.
seems like legitimate cheating. Like, you're doing the exam for yourself to prove that you can do it. So asking for help like that, but at the same time asking for help in the sense of like a more general question, just like somebody point me towards, the man page for this, or I'm having X issue. I imagine there's definitely a sense of human validation. or
Yeah.
like just being reasonable about it. Asking somebody for the exploit to do X versus
Yeah, there's probably a reasonable standard for questions and stuff like that.
yeah, it
But
does. I
wow, they
don't
have a lot
see.
of questions on the FAQ.
Well, they received a lot of feedback when they first announced it.
Okay. Yeah, so
Yeah, although I will say, I believe the proctors are in house. Like they are employed by Offsec. It's not some random company doing it.
okay. Yeah, I guess in that kind of
So I'd hope they
helps
have some
alleviate.
education about kind of what the course is about and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
don't
I
see
was
any
also going to
question
say,
that really helps answer what you asked.
yeah. The other thing with them having it in house, it kind of alleviates some of the privacy concerns.
Well,
But
that's part of why they have it in house too, or at least they mentioned that's why they did it in house.
yeah. But yeah, did you have anything else to add on the offensive security course? I think that
Yeah, I mean, well,
covered
I
most
can
of
move
it.
on, or not from the course, but just about the exam itself. I kind of mentioned there the exam itself. Obviously, I can't go into details about what the questions were, but
Yeah.
it didn't feel like playing a CTF. It didn't have those artificially induced challenges, which is kind of like you play a CTF, and I'll say that the OSCE exam felt like playing a CTF. I enjoy CTFs, I didn't mind it, but it felt like a CTF. Whereas this one felt a lot more real world. It felt a lot more like I was on an actual project, I was on an assessment, and this client was doing something really weird. And I was kind of digging into what the client was doing in their code base. Uh, the exam itself, like I'd argue, was the most difficult part of it was the vuln hunting, not on being able to one utilize any existing vulns or two just on the exploitation. Like once I found anything, it was like 20 minutes and I had the exploit working. Most of the exam was finding the issues, which I think is actually makes the certification somewhat valuable. Because it requires that you're able to kind of enter into doing some manual code auditing.
Yeah.
It shows like somebody who passes it, assuming they pass it normally without cheating, all of that, has some level of competency to approach an unknown code base and audit it. So I mean that I think gives it a lot more valuable than OSCP or OSCE. OSCE just really doesn't fit anywhere. I could go on a rant or a discussion about that, but I won't for now.
Okay.
Because OSCE is it's just a cert that doesn't fit because it's not modern enough and it doesn't really do anything. But
Yeah.
this one I actually like. If I were a hiring manager or whatever and looking at resumes, if I saw somebody had the OSWE cert, I would be willing to kind of say, okay, they can probably skip part of the filtering. I wouldn't say they'd get a
Okay.
job. Like nobody's getting a job because they have certification. I believe a lot of the hiring in the industry takes place by demonstrating your skill.
Yeah.
That said, one of the first stages is always like some simple challenges that just anybody kind of gets access to. That's why in AppSec, you have a lot of people being hired without a ton of experience if they can demonstrate their ability. So there are these early kind of filter stages to a lot of, like before you get to get interviewed, you do a filter challenge or two.
Yeah, like simple screening.
Yeah, like I mean, they might still be reasonably complicated exploits, but even if you don't quite get all the way to finishing it, you'll, depending on how far you got, that'll let you pass the filter or not. Say, like, I can't do with this, I'd be somewhat willing to let them skip the filter and go into interviewing them, just
Okay.
because of what this kind of illustrates about what they can do. The exam, like I said, felt very. I mean, it wasn't realistic, but
It was
the
close to
way
realistic compared
the way
to.
you went about it, the way you had to go and solve it, I think was really well done. And while the course, like I said, I was kind of meh about, the
Mhm.
exam I have a lot of respect for. Not because it's super difficult either. Like I think it's definitely approachable by a lot of people, but just because of what it actually required to pass it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think I can't really add anything because I've never taken an offensive security course.
Yeah, and I mean,
Mainly
to be
just because of the
clear,
cost.
people
Like,
can get courses or can work without having a certification. It's definitely not a necessity in the industry.
yeah, I think it is a little bit. Like I do see on a on the hiring threads and stuff I've looked at on Reddit and stuff like that. A lot of people talk up certs a lot. I don't think they're as important as some people like to think they are.
No, they're
Um,
not. They are definitely kind of they're pushed a lot more than they need to be. I mean, the
yeah,
big thing is you need the skill. If you have, I've said it many times, if you have the skill, there are companies, especially on the AppSec side of things, if you're able to find vulnerabilities, there are companies willing to hire you. There are companies
yeah,
absolutely willing to hire you, even if you don't have experience, because most people come from really varied backgrounds. I mean, before I got into AppSec, I was in the army in a very non-tech field. I was in artillery, and I was a
yeah.
magician. I mean, that's not exactly a straightforward path into security. Security was just a hobby for many years before that.
I feel like you could make a joke out of that somewhere.
Well,
Magician to army to security, but
but I mean, it's just like, and people come from crazy backgrounds. I think I had a coworker that came from like a psychology degree. I mean, like, the industry doesn't care a ton about the certs. The certs just help you a little bit if you have nothing else.
nothing
The
else to
best thing
show.
you can do is have CVEs or have actual findings under your name, because that
Yeah,
speaks volumes. If you've actually found some proper O days, and done some responsible disclosure on them and their cool vulnerabilities, that'll help you get a job pretty much anywhere because that's what the job is.
yeah. So
But yeah, moving on to
we'll move
somebody
on
else
from that.
that's looking for a job, SandboxEscaper.
Yep. Um, so actually,
They
so
removed their comment.
well, not only that, I think so there was actually a GitHub repo of the POC or whatever, and I think they actually took it down. I think SandboxEscaper took it down. I don't think you can
Yeah, well,
find
I
it.
noticed their blog was modified too, like removed everything. But yeah,
Yeah.
I like this. They did this with the last time too when they posted on Reddit. Also, at the end there, also, how do I get a job in InfoSec?
Oh man, I have some opinions on SandboxEscaper because it seems like very attention seeking. Um, pretty much every she's done this before, right? Like there's been a
Yeah, this
lot
is like
of
the 5th or the 6th thing. Back
yeah,
in August, in October, I think, and in December. Those are
yeah,
the dates I have written, but I didn't actually go and dig into them too much.
yeah. I remember one of them had to do with like I think a few of them actually were like arbitrary file things, like bypassing file permissions. Basically just like permission bypasses, and they were interesting. Some of them I think were talked up a little bit more than like they were made to be a little bit more impactful than they actually were. But in like every case, every release, it's like talks about can't get a job in infosec and why won't like anybody hire me. But then in the same blog post, she'll put like I hate America. um I've actively given 0 days to the foreign nations against America. like really stupid statements that like no like would probably put you on the blacklist for a lot of hiring positions. So it's always I've always been a bit confused about like
Well, I mean,
what
to
this
be
person's
fair,
actual
like,
intentions
they're
are.
based in the UK. Like, SandboxEscaper, I believe, is from the UK. Uh,
Yeah,
so,
but
like, they might
like
have some issue with America. And, I mean, America, to be fair, is pretty much the central hub for security.
that's what I was gonna say. Like if you're gonna have all this anti-American statements and stuff, you're any American company probably is going to be a lot less likely to pick you up. And pretty much all security companies I can think of, like most of them are American.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, most of the major security companies are American. Like, it's partially just because the hub for tech is also, the West Coast, California.
California. Yeah.
That said, I mean, like, they have mentioned, like, they've had some talking about some suicide comments. It
Yeah.
seems like there's been some mental issues related depression, being trans. I mean, that I mean, I'm sure it's not easy, especially if they don't have like a support system around them of people that actually support them in that. I don't know really any of the details, so I can't say, but it seems like there's more going on besides what we see in these releases.
Yeah.
That said, it seems like focusing more on the actual releases though. I mean, it seems like a lot of them are generally based on other vulnerabilities. Like they've gone through and just like, somebody else found a vulnerability, it got patched. They found a bypass or like the same vulnerability elsewhere. That's what like this one itself, I think, was based on Forshaw.
Yeah. Do you know much about that? I
I
didn't get a chance
don't.
to. Oh, okay.
I
That's okay.
didn't dig into the actual thing, but they mentioned that the bug itself was inspired by Forshaw.
Yeah, I wanted to look more at the actual POC, but by the time I got around to it, it was removed. And I mean, I'm sure it's somewhere out there, but yeah, I just didn't get a chance to look at it. It's
Yeah.
kind of sucks that it was taken down like that.
Yeah, like I
Because
said, it's probably out there somewhere. That said, I mean, it does sound like they've. So, I mean, in one of their previous things, they released a ODA, and then their comment was, I don't care about life anymore. Neither do I ever want to submit to Microsoft anyway. And then they dropped the ODA for whatever Windows area.
yeah.
But then later they tweeted out, I screwed up, not Microsoft. They're actually a cool company. Depression sucks. Also, this bug in the use of hard links. Okay, this is actually where I must be remembering the Forshaw stuff, because in this tweet there, they actually mentioned was inspired by Forshaw. So my
Oh, okay.
apologies. The current one probably isn't that. I just didn't get gray for this, misremembered. That said, like it sounds like they've tried to submit for a bounty and then something happened. Don't know what, don't know the details there. I just find this whole thing really weird though. Like you said, kind of attention grabbing. I mean, it very well might be that this is somebody that's gainfully employed and is just trolling. I mean, even
Oh,
if these
top tier
are kind
troll.
of,
So
even
yeah,
if these are, somewhat decent issues to be pulling out, I mean, it still takes time to find them, even if they are based on other issues. So they've got the time to spend trying to find them. And that means they also have the money to spend the time trying to find them. So, I mean, it's possible that's, a high school kid or something, too. I mean, we don't know the details. There's a lot of ways to explain it. But that kind of makes me question if they're actually, unemployed.
yeah. So I have something else I want to bring up because I just remembered it. So I'll pull up the tweet. It should still be up. Nope, it's not. Okay. Well, I have a screenshot because the Discord embed still has the actual tweet. So I'll just take a screenshot of it and put that up. There was this tweet put out. So I think this was the reason that she dropped the the POC publicly. Was because in the past, um, yeah, she said I got a reward $2,500 for each, but not 10,000 as per, and then the T.co link, and that's basically, I'll bring that up too. But that's basically Microsoft's bounty page. So, they have this program description and they have like payouts. So here it is. Here, where's the 10,000? I think it's these ones. So she expected to get 10,000, and she only got 2,500 or whatever it was. So one thing I do want to mention here, though, is they do mention the report quality is important. So, the tweet obviously says I provided all necessary details with a high quality POC and explanation, and this mentions that the report quality at like low to medium would be in that $2,500 range. But one discussion that kind of sparked with that was I think that the bounty was worth more before, and then they were getting a lot of submissions for that bug type or whatever, and then they lowered it. And there was kind of this discussion going on about, if that was fair to researchers and whatnot. I was just curious about what you thought about that because I didn't see you jump into that discussion. I think you were busy with something. So,
No, I didn't. The way you've described it, is it fair to researchers? No. That said, bounties are about the company. If they
yeah.
realize, I would rather them drop the payment and still offer something than just not pay. and decide, nope, that's now out of scope until we deal with it or get rid of the bounty. I mean, bounties are something companies do. There's no reason why they have to pay for these issues. That said, I mean, there's kind of a sense of, well, we advertise, we're going to pay out $30,000, and then, they change the payment on it as soon as somebody starts reporting it, as soon as people start looking at it. I mean, like,
Yeah.
that is an unfair move, absolutely.
I'm-
But I can't fault the company, like, especially if they've noticed that, and hopefully they're taking steps now to resolve those types of issues, to realize that they can't afford to keep paying that out and still offer something rather than just dropping it.
See, yeah, that's my issue. Is like it definitely sucks for the researchers. From a researcher standpoint, I can definitely see getting angry about it. But I think it's unreasonable to expect the company to always pay out the same when the supply and demand is kind of fluctuating, right? Like if you're getting a lot of submissions for a bug type, or that bug type is less powerful because of a new mitigation or something, it's not reasonable to expect them to keep paying out the same amount they have in the past. Even though that sucks for the researcher, obviously, they're getting paid less. It's just I don't think it's reasonable to hold a company to like to bind them because you paid this in the past, you got to pay this now.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. I mean, I think there should be some reasonable announcement of intent to change the price. Like, if we're talking about what a company should do when they're making that change, and maybe they did announce this, I don't know. Um, but like, if they had, say, 30 days before, like, hey, we're no longer going to be paying this much for it as of X days, like 30 days in the future or whatever, that I think would be more respectful of the researchers than just suddenly dropping it. I think as a company, they can do what they want. It's their sole discretion to decide how much to pay for something.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the right way to go about that would be to announce it and let researchers know that it'll be dropping.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I proposed in the discussion that was happening too, was pretty much the exact same timeline, around 30 days. In 30 days we're going to be dropping this for, you know, and then preferably, they'd give some sort of a surface level reason. Obviously, they don't have to go deep into it, because then, you don't want them, like, you shouldn't expect them to go too deep into technical detail of why they're lowering it. But I think, they should put out a reasonable amount of information,
Yeah,
like
I mean,
something
that's
like,
just how they can respect the researchers that are spending their time and are looking at the amount that they can get paid for to decide where they're spending their time.
yeah,
So to be hit by that by surprise, especially if you're somebody who's trying to make a living off of these. But
yeah,
that said, that comes down to, the merits of actually trying to make a living off of bug bounties.
yeah, yeah. It's by nature very volatile, so it's yeah. I mean, I think it's loosely related to the Windows drop. I think that's part of the reason why she's doing it, is because of that tweet. So I just wanted to bring that up. Um, but yeah, I don't want to go too deep into that discussion, because I feel like you could talk for hours about bounties and
Well, I mean,
logistics
it's
of
the
how
last
they
episode. We can go for a few hours, right?
work.
No, I think we're both kind of in agreement, though. Is it the most fair thing to just drop it? No, but the company has no need to actually be fair. And there are things they could do to be fair to researchers. Like, I think we're generally in agreement, so there isn't really that much discussion to be had.
Yeah. One comment I did want to point out: this perfect debt person on Reddit said, "Well, that and the FBI has emailed us all not to hire you." I don't know who us is in that statement, but
I mean, clearly that's a troll or a joke or whatever.
I mean, maybe not. It could be. I mean,
Well, I mean, it would be, as I think somebody else kind of comments there, about that being an unconstitutional blacklisting. Like,
yeah,
I don't believe if it got out that the FBI was actually making or encouraging private companies not to hire an individual, I can't imagine that would reflect well on them for any reason.
yeah. And then the other funny thing was the README.RTF. I'd never really, RTF isn't really a popular format for write-ups, but apparently the repo had an RTF for the write-up instead of Markdown. So not really sure why, but I thought that was a funny thing to bring
The
up.
format war is still going on. We know what side they're on.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we'll go into the
Yeah, we could talk
Krebs
about
on
one of
security
the
article.
massive failures of the week.
Yeah. So
hundreds.
American Financial Corp.
Yeah, I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, so apparently real estate insurance, First American Financial Corp, they had a page that basically leaked a bunch of PII, bank account numbers, tax records, social security numbers, driver's license images. There was more stuff than that. And again, it was a bug because you could access that without authentication. It was it reminds me of that router bug we were talking about last week. And I just want to bring up, like, what is it with all the no authentication information disclosures we've been talking about lately? I feel like we've been talking about it like the last 4 episodes.
Well, I mean, it's actually a reasonably common issue. Actually, did we talk about I think he was 19 years old, made $1 million doing bug bounties? Did we talk about that on stream?
Which one was this? The
teenager who made $1 million on HackerOne.
Oh yeah, we did talk about that.
He talked about kind of some of the things that he would look for, and he actually would look for exactly this type of issue, where it either unauthenticated or not. But I mean, one of the issues here is all you need to know is the link to a document link. And they give an example of the document number as being, it's always hard to count zeros. 60 or 7 zeros and then 75 as being the first record. I'm going to presume that the zeros and then 76 was another document and so on and so forth, which is what they mentioned. Just using that type of ID for access to something is is a big issue. Just being able to increment the ID and not doing any auth checking for the individual document. Just, it's a valid document, they must be okay to read it.
Probably a good way to fix that would just be taking IDs and hashing them like MD5 or something.
Well, use like the KUID, or just use a UID.
Yeah. But I should say that this is probably the most serious one that so far. Like,
that we've
bank account
about,
numbers.
Definitely a lot of very serious information, as you're saying. Bank account numbers, mortgage and tax records, social security numbers, wire transaction receipts, driver's license images.
Like everything,
any document that was emailed. Yeah.
Anything you need for identity theft, you could pull from this. This
is where. And I mean, the other thing is, Krebs actually mentioned that he was contacted by a real estate developer in Washington who said he had little luck getting a response from the company about what he found.
Oh, really? I didn't notice that. Let me see if we can find that. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, that's actually concerning to me. Like, this is where I really feel like every company should have a security contact point with, at least the response within, say, 5 days, 1 business, or even 2 business weeks. I mean, sure, things should be quicker, but, like, setting that off as, like, a universal rule. I mean, I think that could at least be somewhat fair, but I could imagine that being abused, spam their email, and then they're not responding fast enough, because they've got, like, 5 million things to reply to. But I don't know, I mean, one, for like a company in terms of just their security posture, they should definitely have a security contact. But I mean, especially with these banks and stuff, I feel like it should be legally required.
Oh yeah, I was about to say, when you're dealing with this type of information that's like government issued identification and stuff like that, I feel like this company should be fined for this. Like, this is definitely gross negligence.
They very well may still get fined. I don't know. I'm not sure what the laws are with that, but I believe, there's a good chance they will be. But I'm just saying, like, they also should have had a better way for this to be disclosed to them.
Oh yeah, like, I think it should, like, especially when you're dealing with this kind of data, there should be a legally enforced security posture for
Well, I think there is. Like, I think there are some standards that are legally required for it.
Okay.
I'm specifically only referring to the contact, like once it's been discovered.
Yeah, but I think even for beforehand, you know what I mean? Like this is a pretty blatant issue that I think it's reasonable to expect the company to be able to uh, discover and patch before it's abused.
Well, for sure. I mean, this is such a trivial issue if it is as described, where it's like
Yeah.
they use an incrementing number as the secret ID.
Yeah, I was just curious if
Nothing, since it's
there's
just
a fine
disclosed, we're not going to know anything about a fine just yet.
yeah,
But I believe
just
with information like this, I believe there are already kind of some legal requirements around it. Like
yeah.
I would anticipate there'd be a fine. I don't actually know the U.S. laws for this, but I
Yeah.
would anticipate that they'd be violating something here.
This kind of reminds me of the Equifax data breach that happened a year or two ago.
Yeah,
Um, what I wonder is if this breach is actually even more serious. I mean, the Equifax stuff blew up, right? It was everywhere. They were getting hammered from everybody. Um, Honestly, this article I didn't even know about until you shared it to me. Like, I don't feel like this is being talked about really much at all. Maybe that's just me, my ignorance. I haven't seen it in other areas that I look, or it might just be anecdotal, but um, I'm surprised I haven't seen this talked about more.
I think part of it is the Equifax stuff was a lot larger. I believe is there a
Yeah, I
lot
think
more central to people. Like
yeah.
Equifax is one of like three companies that deals with like your the credit ratings and stuff. I believe in the U.S. I think it's three. Might only be two companies. But like, there's a lot more or a much greater percentage of people that were compromised by that than by this.
Yeah, still it's close though, I'd say. Like I'd say it's close in impact.
Oh no, how
Um,
big was the Equifax breach? Because
Memory
this
doesn't serve me
is
well. So I'll have to look it up using Google. 143 million people. I don't know if it's
personal information of 143
yeah.
million. That, and then I also have another source here saying 209,000 consumer credit card credentials were taken. So that sounds a
Okay.
significant chunk more serious than this one. Well, this one
Okay,
has
so that was a
banking
bit more serious than
information.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think the Equifax was a lot larger and more serious. Like, I mean, the information still in here is absolutely still serious, but I would definitely consider the Equifax to be like an order of magnitude more serious.
Okay. But yeah, regardless, like this is definitely like I hope this company gets fined, but
Yeah, I can't imagine they won't get out without a fine. But again, I don't know the U.S. laws, so I can't
you might
actually
even
comment with certainty on that.
I mean, I don't know how this would hold up in a court or whatever, but I could even see this potentially like you might be able to sue the company if your information was leaked like this.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, I just thought of that. Um, but yeah, like this is one major fail, and we'll talk about another one now, which is Google.
Yeah, I mean, so we've talked about this as Google admits to storing G Suite user, particular enterprise customers, passwords in plain text for 14 years. Now, when Facebook had a similar issue, and I think this report actually kind of comments on Facebook having stored passwords too, I was a little bit forgiving. With Facebook, I saw it as, likely logging or something like that. It seemed to be what we were being told, that Facebook had accidentally been logging information. With this one, though, it seems that Google has basically in 2005 they introduced a new feature allowing domain admins to set and recover passwords for their company users, mainly used, I guess, to add new employees into the system. And it was in doing that that these plaintext passwords were stored. This feature doesn't exist anymore, but it sounds like it was more than just like a simple, oh, they accidentally logged the password. Seems like they stored the passwords or did something. They don't give us enough information to know, but did something really stupid here. That
Yeah.
resulted in like a handful of enterprise customers having their passwords stored for the last 14 years, and a feature that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. So I will say that uh, this isn't like Google wide. It's not like if you just have a Gmail account. It is G Suite specific. So it's for
G Suite
businesses that have G
Enterprise,
Suite set
yeah,
up.
it's definitely
Yeah.
limited. Like the number of people being hit by this is limited. It sounds like they were able to just contact everybody. I don't know if they gave a number for it. I didn't take note of one. But I mean, yeah, definitely limited, which is a nice thing. But still, like what I imagine being done here is like, oh well, if they want to set the password, let's just store what their password is until they reset it or something. And like
Yeah.
doing something like that, like I don't know what they did. We don't know, but the fact
So
that this
actually,
was
I
part of a
can help with
recovery
that.
process.
Yeah. So I can help shed a little bit of light on that because I found somebody actually posted a copy of the direct email on Y Combinator. So we were writing to inform you an internal system that logged account sign-up information for diagnostic purposes. Um,
Oh, okay,
Stored
so
in
this
an
was a
unhashed
logging
format.
thing. Didn't sound
Yeah.
like it was. Okay. So
Yeah,
that
the
could make a
article didn't
fall
go too
under
in depth,
the
so
that could kind of push it under the Facebook thing again. Like I totally get when people overzealous logging because it's super easy to make that mistake when you're not thinking about all the possible information that's included in the logs. There should be other systems in place. There's a ton of things that can be done to prevent sensitive information going into logs. But it is just such an easy mistake. And then when you just toss in the scale of Google, like I totally understand when people make that mistake. It shouldn't be made, but I get it.
it's more understandable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like you've got to really be thinking about it at the time when it happens. Sometimes to catch it, which is different than just really bad architecture.
Yeah. And another thing I do want to point out from this email is they say the log information was retained for 14 days and then was
Oh, so
deleted.
this might be about.
So,
There were two issues here. If you go back to the original report,
okay.
uh, a second list was also discovered. Right over here. That might be what the Y Combinator is referring to then.
Okay. So,
Those
okay,
ones,
that
yeah,
is.
that kind of did sound like logging because it was only stored for a short period. So yeah, again, I'll just say I don't know what happened with that original finding, like kind of the title log issue. It sounds like it was a pretty big failure of some type of architectural issue and not logging.
Yeah.
It sounds like the Y Combinator Hacker News link, though, is referring to the second one.
Yeah. I didn't. Yeah. It's a bit weird that there is two separate issues. Like that all deal
Although
with
perhaps
password.
that's why they put them together because either one, they knew people might report on it and get confused over, well, one was for 14 days, the other for
Yeah.
14 years. I mean, 14 is shared, right?
14. Yeah. One thing I do want to comment on this font that this site uses sucks. This looks awful on Firefox. I think on Chrome it renders fine. It must be like a browser incompatibility, but wow, this font sucks. It sucks for you too, right? It's not just me, right?
Well, on what we're using to view it, yeah, I don't think I saw any issue when I was reading it on. Yeah, I did see any issue when I'm reading it on my own machine.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So maybe it's just a thing with Rabbit, but
Or Linux. I assume this is
yeah.
running under Linux.
Yeah, it is.
So
So
could be a font from that.
yeah. So I will say, what do you think of the response to it? Like, they sent out the email. They said they were going to be forcing password resets, but I haven't seen like a full, response from Google about it. Maybe there is one. I don't know if you've seen one. I was just
I
curious about what
haven't
your.
seen one.
Okay. Let me just.
I mean,
look
if they've
really quick.
contacted the people involved, I mean, that's kind of what you need to do.
Yeah, I just didn't know if they had like a page dedicated to it, but yeah, they just said they notified the users that were affected by it. So, I mean, yeah, I guess that's good enough. I kind of wish they
You always
went a
kind
bit
of
more
want
in
more.
detail.
But that's just kind of us. We want to know the technical details of what actually happened. Partially so we can make fun of people when they do really stupid things, and also just kind of for personal education. Like, what mistakes are the reasonable quality engineers at Google? I don't think they're really hiring too many terrible engineers. What type of mistakes are they making? Because odds are other companies are making these same mistakes, they're just less visible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not even just the technical details, though. Like,
Well, technical details are what I want.
Oh, yeah, I would like those too. But I mean, even just like a list that clearly lays out everything instead of having to go to blog posts that could be missing information and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Well, it looks like their email was better. It just wasn't public.
But even in their email, they stated they were talking about the 14-day thing, and I don't see.
Well, maybe that was because this person was only impacted by that, though.
Yeah, that's possible too.
In fact, I feel like it's pretty unlikely, but I don't think I saw an email come in
from our G Suite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see one either. I think it was. Yeah, I don't think it affected us, but because I think the feature was removed before.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's unclear where this 14-day one came from and where the other one came from.
Yeah, and that's where I'd like, a bit more information.
Like more information, yeah. And maybe Google will still come out with something after they've looked at it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Usually they're pretty quick on that, so I'm guessing we're not going to see anything.
Yeah, probably not. And yeah, here's where they mentioned the Facebook thing. They were talking about the IRPC of Ireland is going to look into if it breached GDPR. So that could actually be something that maybe is taken against Google too. If any, European Union countries try to do a GDPR hit against Google for this information.
Yeah, I guess, it's worth mentioning GDPR, I think, just turned a year old.
Yeah.
Last week.
Yeah, so you could definitely see some, like, the EU going after Google for it. Potentially.
Yep. You definitely could.
Yeah. So that's the two major fails of the week. We'll go into some white papers. So our first white paper we have up is the safety versus security attacking avionic systems with humans in the loop. So it's essentially about attacking airplanes and airplane equipment.
Yeah, well, to be fair, this paper itself wasn't so much about the attacks as it was about the pilot response to being attacked. It does cover three particular attacks against the traffic collision avoidance system, ground proximity warning system, and glide slope spoofing.
Yeah, the instrument landing system. Yeah, so this paper is actually kind of neat. Like, it doesn't go into too much of the technical details of the attacks, but it goes more into, like, I think they had pilots in, like, flight sims.
Yeah, they use a flight simulator. Pilots would fly and they would perform these attacks against them. Obviously, it would be a bit questionable to do this with them actually flying, so I don't see any other way for them to have done this. But I mean, they do talk about the attacks, like the ground proximity warning. They talk about the cost of actually performing some of them, and I mean the cost there to get to do the false radar pulses. I think they mention, I think it was in that area, was like $10,000. So like it's not crazy expensive, and that's the thing. A lot of these radio attacks in general are really kind of becoming more accessible, but they're, just to be clear, they are highly illegal to do a lot of this. Something like GPS, like denial of service against GPS devices or spoofing is generally illegal to do in any area. Mm-hmm. So, like this is also, so like there's that barrier of it. And that means like there isn't a lot of research being done into these attacks. And also that they seem like kind of soft bodies. Like there are the attacks they talk about are reasonably straightforward to perform. It's transmitting a false radar pulse from like this area as part of their landing and things like that.
Yeah, so you were mentioning about the cost of pulling off some of these attacks. So it varied quite a bit. It seemed the ground proximity warning system, they could attack with like a low $1,000 budget. So they attacked the radio altimeter by transmitting frequencies between, I think it was 4200 megahertz and 4400, and then by doing that they could trigger false those things you hear from the movies when planes are crashing, the terrain, pull up. They could trigger those remotely. And I think they said like the antenna and everything would be about $1,000. But then they talked about the traffic collision avoidance system, and they said that would require a high-powered setup. You'd need like an amplifier, a transceiver,
high-powered,
antenna.
and that one requires basically a plane. Because it happens in the air. I mean, in theory, maybe like implant this in like baggage or something. Like it just needs to be on the plane, perhaps. It doesn't need to necessarily be attached. Like there were definitely some limits to that. But I mean, the paper itself wasn't necessarily about the practicality of doing the attacks. I mean, they talk about them, and that's a very interesting aspect. I think it's only going to become more accessible over the years.
Well, I did want to mention with the traffic collision avoidance system, they actually did say that it can be pulled off from high ground or near an airport. Like it's actually not as proximity dependent as traffic collision avoidance system. The ground proximity warning system, I think you need to be a bit closer. The instrument landing system, though, I didn't look at too much, so it could be that one you were thinking of. But yeah, the traffic collision avoidance system seemed like it could be attacked from, like, you didn't even have to be in the airport, you could just be near it. So that one is probably the most worrying one, at least to me.
I don't know. See, here's my thing. If you want to talk about worrying, though, this paper actually gives me... I'm not too worried about any of them, based on the pilot response. So jumping into that, like with the GPWS, I don't know if they have the stats for the traffic collision avoidance one, or at least I didn't write them down. I only have the stats for the other two. But that said, with the ground proximity warning system, 33% of the pilots could see they were okay to land and landed. 66.7% followed the warning, turned around, and half of those people just turned it off and made their second landing. 40% landed just despite the warning, and 1% went around for a third time before landing. So I mean, all of them just took some basic maneuvers, and I mean, it sounds like they were like, they talk about the damages being like time wasted doing that turnaround.
Yeah, but so it seemed like almost all the attacks were based on just trying to cause delays and confusion. None of them were like trying to, bring the aircraft down or anything like that. It was mostly just to cause confusion in the cockpit, it seemed.
Yeah, and I mean, for the most part, like especially with the ground proximity one, it seemed like, it caused them to make a second approach once for the most part, which pretty much any flight's going to be able to do without a huge issue.
Yeah.
Like, it cuts on the time a little bit, but there's such padding built into a lot of the times that's not really a big issue. It didn't cause anybody to need to go around to another airport.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. I mean, seeing the pilot response, they're trained to respond to this. They don't just blindly trust the sensors. It just kind of gives me some confidence in this not really being a huge issue, even though the systems are somewhat soft.
That is, though, like, all these attacks on this, like, these systems are all sensors. But what about when you start talking about attacks on other systems that the pilot can't exert manual control over? You know what I mean?
What systems can't they exert manual control over? I mean, a big part of the...
Like, what if let's say they mess with the altimeter, right? Like, I don't know if they could. Probably not a system you can easily access, but, just for argument's sake, let's say the altimeter, if you're flying a plane, you might know roughly how high you are, but you're not going to have an exact number about, how high you are.
No, but you also don't even need actually, I don't believe pilots ever actually have the exact number. I think a lot of time they work with, now this is coming purely from a Reddit thread type deal. Somebody had mentioned how, like, after they kind of get into cruising altitude, they're never worried about their exact distance from the ground. Like that, they deal with some other number that's much more rounded. I mean, nobody cares if there's a hill that you're flying over, you're at 30,000 feet, roughly speaking, and there's a hill that goes like 100 feet up, it doesn't matter. You don't go 100 feet up because there's a hill on the ground that's going up 100 feet. Like, that level of detail just doesn't matter. And I mean, the pilots are trained to be in control of the flight. They use the sensors to give them information about what they're doing. But, they also use their eyes to drive it, basically. They're not just relying on the sensors.
Yeah.
That is where the instrumented landing, though, the glide scope spoofing comes in. That, in combination with bad weather, they'd mentioned like 86%, some people just ignored the glide spoofing because they could see it is okay to land. Here's the runway, I can land on it. The glide scope spoofing would basically make them think that the approach was different from where the actual runway was. In bad weather, where they can't see the runway, they would have a very limited time to actually decide to pull up and recognize that the approach information was wrong.
Yeah, like a blizzard or anything like that. So they did mention, or another.
Although blizzard, I should say, like, they also won't land in a lot of those conditions. Like, I've been on a flight that went into land, weather was too bad, so they flew like 3 hours back.
That sounds like fun when you're the passenger.
It wasn't too bad because I was in like business class, but it would have sucked to have been economy class on that one. Because we landed back. Like, we literally went halfway back because I was flying Vancouver to Saskatoon. And we flew halfway back and went to Calgary. Landed there, sat on the runway for a couple hours, took off, and went back to Saskatoon. It definitely would have sucked being in economy for that. But I don't know. This paper, honestly, like, seeing the pilot's response gives me a bit of confidence. Yeah, there are issues, but I feel like the pilots generally responded well to being under attack.
Okay, well, I'll shake your confidence a little bit, because I did find an interesting quote in here, which was recent research from the U.S. Department of Homeland indicated that a remote compromise of Boeing 757 aircraft was dismissed by Boeing.
So that comes down to another thing, though. Like, I assume you've heard about all the...
heard about what, sorry?
Like, all the... Is it 757 MAX? Is that the plane that's been crashing? There's one of the Boeing planes that have been crashing a few times.
There was some sensor that... I can't remember the exact details.
I guess.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact details. There was something like they were talking about.
I have some questions about Boeing. And I mean, that is more about the plane than about the pilots.
Yeah.
So like, there are still concerns when it comes to flying. Generally, I'm not that concerned because, frankly, if I'm flying somewhere, it's because flying's the best option, and at that point, I can't do anything about it. I'm not going to look. Actually, maybe I would if, Boeing keeps having issues. But generally, I'm not looking at the type of plane and deciding not to fly because it's on a plane I don't trust. Maybe it'll reach that point, but at this point, it's out of my control, so I don't really worry about it. That said, I know plenty of people that would worry about it, so...
Yeah, and I mean, I can't really think of any... Like, there hasn't been any planes that have been brought down by cyber attacks, have there? I don't think there's been any... cases.
None come to mind, although at the same time, would we know it was necessarily a cyber attack that led to the problem, or would it look like something else, like a sensor failure?
That's true. I mean, that's a fair point.
I think it's just hard to say that we would know until we actually start seeing them. Which is kind of a catch-22.
Do you think we will start seeing those in the future, though? Like, that being more and more of a concern?
I don't know.
Because, I mean, there is a high barrier to entry to research these, right? Like, a lot of these parts, like, people can't just buy airplanes to do security.
No, but you can just buy parts off eBay.
For airplanes?
Yeah, maybe you can actually buy some of the sensors and stuff. Just straight up go buy it off eBay. It's... so you're not necessarily getting the latest thing, but that said, I mean, there are only a few people where this is going to be most people, even malicious, hackers, aren't out looking for blood. They're not looking to kill.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, like you're looking at terrorist attacks using this. Might we see it? Yes. I don't think we're going to see this coming out of nation states too soon. Maybe we will actually, because there are some questionable nation states. I mean, maybe North Korea, maybe something like that. We can see it out of a nation
Iran.
state.
Yeah.
But in general, like most nation states aren't going to be attacking like a civilian plane like that. There's the rules of warfare pretty much. So that means there's a very limited set of people who would want to pull off this type of attack. They do exist. And like I said, there is kind of the barrier to entry on it.
Yeah.
The radio gear, though, is getting cheaper and cheaper.
And better and better. So
I mean, like that can happen. It's just most researchers aren't out for blood. So,
well, I mean, the one thing that kind of makes me think about it is, we hear a lot about oh, that's my phone. Let me just stop that. Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot about people doing stupid stuff like pointing lasers into airplanes that are flying. So this just seems like, one of those kinds of attacks. Obviously, it's not as easy to pull off than just shining a laser.
No,
it
definitely requires intent.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe it's not a good comparison. It just kind of that's what made me think of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I do think the laser comparison definitely falls apart. Also, just around, most people they don't realize the impact that has on the pilots. Yeah. Somebody who's doing this with like the radios, absolutely, they know what they're doing. There's that intent there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's everything on this paper. It's very surface level, not technical. So
yeah, like I said, it's not looking at like the technical exploits. It's looking at the pilot's response.
So if you're a listener who is terrified of airplanes, maybe give this paper a read. Maybe like
probably won't improve their confidence.
Well, hey, it improved yours a little bit. So
yeah, but I'm already kind of biased towards just giving them benefit of the doubt. So.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So we'll move on to the Malware Guard extension. So this paper talks about using Intel SGX, so secure enclaves, to conceal cache attacks. So Intel SGX, it's basically used to try to create secure enclaves for important data, passwords, like passwords for password managers, encryption keys, and stuff like that. So it's, from what I understand, it's basically to try to prevent side channel attacks against trying to leak that information.
So what I liked about this paper, though, is it covered kind of a realistic scenario for malware to actually hide inside of SGX and attack the host system, which is something that was said, well, you don't have what is it? You can't make syscalls, you can't do IO, there's no timers for cache attacks. You can't do that inside the enclave, so there isn't a risk of malware hiding inside of the enclave. Which they showed clearly can be done. They can. Or the paper does demonstrate that malware could do a prime plus probe attack. Which we talked about. It was another, I don't remember what episode it was, but we talked about the different attacks. Or cache attacks on another.
I feel like we talk about side channel attacks like every podcast.
Side channels are definitely one of the big areas of research right now, and since we're looking at the research coming out, we're going to see side channel attacks. We're going to see the AI, the machine learning stuff, because those are big areas of research.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. I mean, if people want to hear us talk about just whatever the security news is that everybody talks about, well, I probably wouldn't want to do that podcast. I mean,
no, I wouldn't either.
I want to point out things that are interesting, even if I don't totally understand them at times. It's still,
yeah. I mean, so we didn't really touch on it. So the reason that like malware was always of interest to try to get into a secure enclave was you could basically prevent it from being analyzed. Can't debug it, can't really reverse it because it's secured in that enclave. But like Z said, they no syscalls, can't do any IO operations. But one thing I found interesting about their attack was they talked about doing a timing attack, and kind of similar to browsers. From what I understood, they tried to make it so that you can't get accurate timings inside of the SGX either, so that you can't pull off timing attacks. But so they don't have access to the native timestamp counter, is what they call it. So let me just go to that in the paper.
Yeah, that's what they call it, but their solution. I mean, it's not their solution. Other things have done this, but
yeah. So the instructions for that are basically RDTSC and RDTSCP instructions, and those are blocked from SGX. But they actually found a way, like a workaround around that's actually more accurate than the native timestamp counter, which is like I'm not even sure how it's more accurate. I didn't see.
Well, so what it is, the solution that they have is essentially a counting thread. Starts at 0 and just counts up. So then they determined how long, so your increment takes 1 cycle, and the cache read to get the previous value takes 4 cycles. There's a 0.25 cycle throughput rate, and they basically use the timing of that to know how many cycles would go between each increment, and they use that to determine timings.
But couldn't scheduling really throw that off?
Inside of SGX,
oh, maybe not, yeah.
But yeah, so they basically set up the counting thread and know. In terms of counting, they might just know how long the quantums are, so they can determine things that way.
Yeah.
But they're able at the very least to figure out what they need to, which is how long the probe part of the prime probe takes.
Yeah. So they do state that in the end they were able to recover 96% of an RSA key within 5 minutes. I'm just seeing here, I don't know why they didn't put the key size in here though, because I feel like that would be kind of important.
Did they maybe talk about it earlier when they go over the RSA algorithm?
They might. I'm just gonna try to.
Oh, RSA key size for evaluation.
4096. Yeah. Okay, so that is a fairly substantial key size. So
yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty technical paper. Just you have to understand how they do provide a bit of background on how SGX works. But honestly, I don't really do anything at that level of secure enclaves and stuff. They pose a few solutions at the bottom of the paper to try to solve it. So one thing they did was they said they would eliminate timers, I think. Oh, maybe not. Let me go to the solutions section just because I think... Okay, it can't find it. What is going on here with Control F? I'll just scroll to the bottom of the paper. But, they posed a few ways to try to combat that from both software and a hardware level. And here it is here. So one of the things they suggested was exponent blinding. I didn't know if maybe you could offer a bit more on that, because I know you've done a bit more with RSA than I have. Did you
no, I can't
check out the section? Okay.
No, I didn't, honestly.
Okay. So yeah, they propose a few solutions around it. But there's a lot of nomenclature in there that you need to look into to be able to properly understand it, like enclave coloring and stuff like that. So if you're interested in the SGX stuff, you'll probably need to look at a lot more of the nomenclature.
It's maybe worth mentioning here that the RSA implementation that they got the key from had to be co-located with the same enclave. It had to be basically on the same CPU.
Yeah,
it had to be in another secure enclave. Kind of within the same area there. So that definitely limits. They talk about attacking the host. This is more attacking a function that the host would use, which is a little bit different.
Point to bring up. Yeah.
I mean, it's still valid because obviously they're trusting the RS, like they're trusting the enclave to be able to securely do this, and then you're still getting the information out. But it is a little bit different than what they kind of talk about as attacking the host. It's kind of
Yeah.
attacking the host by proxy, by attacking another enclave.
Yeah. So we'll talk about we'll move on to the next white paper, which is biometric backdoors. So this talks about basically trying to pull off what are they called? Template poisoning? Yeah, template poisoning attacks against like fingerprints.
Well,
So
I think fingerprints would be one, face ID would be another thing. And I mean, the gist of the attack here that's being presented is every time when you successfully log in on. So this actually was an actual issue with iOS devices a little while back. What would happen is you could log in, use Touch ID, use the Face ID, and every time you would successfully log in, it would still scan your face, and if it was close to what the template was that it was trying to match with, like within 80% or something, it would add the new face to the template. So it still had to be very close to the original. But in using this mechanism, over time you can get templates added that are closer and closer to an attacker's face or an attacker's fingerprint, or and whatever the biometric detail is. You just kind of get it to add templates that are closer and closer to the attacker. I mean that's the gist of the attack. I mean, you've got the whole paper there, but gist of it was in building a few updates that would lead to an attacker being able to use the device also.
Yeah, so they do talk a little bit about how the system updates work. So they say there's basically two major methods that it uses, either supervised or unsupervised updates. So supervised means that you have to enter a PIN or whatever. One thing I'm kind of reminded of is like when you reboot your phone, typically it'll make you enter your PIN before it'll accept any biometric authentication. So like anytime it wants to do an update like that, it'll ask for like a hard PIN or password. But that's, from a usability perspective, they even mentioned here, it's not incredibly convenient. So, the other strategy is the unsupervised, which is, I think, the one you were talking about, where it tries to strengthen it from the background, you know what I mean, without prompting for a password or anything like that. And that's the one they classify as more dangerous for doing stuff like that.
Which is more user friendly.
Yeah, of course, user friendly, less security. That's like the main trade off, right? And they mentioned the scenario you need to be able to attack it, though. So an attacker has to have control over the samples being injected. They must clear the update threshold is the biggest one, right? So they either need to know the pin, or they need some sort of in to be able to pull off the attack, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I get needing the victim samples. It sounds hard, but when we're talking about like Face ID, what you need is a picture of the person.
Yeah.
That's not that hard. Fingerprints are a similar thing. Like I doubt you go around wiping all your fingerprints up. You could steal fingerprints.
I'm paranoid. I absolutely do that. No.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, it sounds really hard. You need to get that, but it means this is really targeted. It's not just going to be random people getting attacked. There's going to be some targeting here. But
yeah,
even though it sounds hard, I don't necessarily think it's going to be that difficult. Maybe if we're talking about like the iris scan or something, that would be a little bit more difficult because you need like a good picture of someone's eye. Although they've even talked actually on the fingerprint topic. Quite a while back, they've talked about extracting fingerprints from pictures because cameras are getting that good now.
That's crazy. I don't remember hearing about that.
Yeah, this was a while ago. I don't know how real world it was. I just remember seeing some headlines about it. But okay. Yeah, I mean, getting the samples, I don't necessarily think will be too hard. Getting the ability to inject them would definitely be a challenge. And that's where I have some questions about the real world applicability. Just because, like I said, to do this, you need to be able to get that update threshold. So we're able to generate samples. This thing talks about generating samples that go between the attacker and the original, which, okay, fine. You can create those samples, but you also need a way to get them in there, which means you need access to the device. You already need to be able to unlock the device. So you're mostly using this as like some type of backdoor. You've got access now, but you maybe won't later.
Yeah.
And I feel like
So
most people that are going to be targeted by something like this aren't just letting random people use their device. So at least the case I kind of thought of that this could be used as like a spouse.
which is a very good example. I wanted to bring that up because before the podcast, Z and I were talking a little bit, and I was thinking like this doesn't really seem. I can't really see many practical applications of this at all. But the spouse thing is actually a good point because I have heard of stories in the past about spouses installing spyware and stuff on their spouses' devices. So
Spyware, or you just know that you're going to divorce them and you want to know what they're doing afterwards or something. Yeah, a messy divorce is the case I was thinking of. But yeah, spyware is another case there too, where like maybe as a spouse you have access now, but you won't in the future.
yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to be sensitive to having other people on their phone are already going to be reasonably protected from this. Just because you do need to already be able to unlock the phone, so you need access to the phone.
yeah. So I did want to talk about
Assuming we're talking about a phone. I keep saying that. Technically, we could be talking about any number of devices. I think a phone is just easiest to.
Phones.
Phone's easiest to kind of talk about.
Yeah. So I did want to talk about a few interesting quotes. One of them was in the conclusion, they stated that it basically had an injected poison sample could lead to a success rate of over 40%. 40%, when you're talking about like exploits and stuff like that, I do consider this kind of an exploit. It's just not, super low level. It does seem a bit low, but it actually isn't too bad when you consider
but I mean 40%, that's 3 attempts.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, if we're talking about phones, most phones will give you 4 to 5 attempts before they'll attempt any lockouts. So 40% is absolutely good enough in pretty much all cases, if you were able to pull it off. And that brings me to the next quote, is the weak assumptions of our attacker scenario and the increasing adoption of unsupervised template updates highlights the severity of the attack, and the results suggest that increased attention needs to be given to the update procedure. I don't entirely agree with that. I don't think it's like they say it highlights the severity of the attack. I actually think it I see more supervised, like I think there's more supervised template updates than there is unsupervised. And even still, to get those samples in, you still need local access. Like you can't do it remotely, or at least
yeah, but I
not
mean
very
this
likely.
is still like you have to consider the threat model of a phone. A threat model of your phone, your physical device, isn't so much about the remote attacks. Your threat is the physical access to it. Like that's part of your threat model for it. It's not part of the threat model when you're talking about like, a kernel vulnerability. You're not as worried about certain things. Given the phone's threat model though, the fact, phone can end up in someone else's hands, all of that, I think it's fair. I would agree that some thought should be given to the unsupervised
Some thought should be given.
It's like it does illustrate that there is the potential for a severe issue here. Just because it's not going to count or impact everybody doesn't mean that it should just be ignored.
Definitely not. I mean, I'm not saying that their statement about it needs to be looked at more is wrong. It's more just I have a bit of an issue with saying it highlights the severity of it because
it doesn't say how severe it is, though. It just says it highlights the severity. Like there is a severity to it. It doesn't really say, like, it doesn't say it highlights it as being, insanely insecure or something. It's just, it highlights the severity of it. I don't know. I mean, I guess I could understand that phrase being read to be, they're like as saying it's really secure. But when I read that, I just read that as kind of a filler text where you just you're trying to pad the length. So it highlights the severity. It showcases the severity of it. Like, doesn't really comment on how severe it is, just it showcases it. That's how I read it.
Yeah, I mean, what I wanted to add in there too, though, is like if you could pull this attack in like like one-time use kind of thing. Like, if you're in like a coffee shop and somebody swipes your phone and does that and then can pull it off, it would be a lot more serious. But from what I gather about this attack, it needs to be carried out over a period of time. Like, you need
It
that
needs
time to
multiple
be able to get
unlocks. I'm not
the.
sure it needs time. You just need to be able to trigger the update, which is when you unlock the device.
You do
So in
need
theory,
to
you
inject
could.
a fair amount of samples though to be able to poison it effectively. So
Do you
that's
know
where
how
I'm
many
just.
samples it was?
I didn't see an actual number.
I thought because their demo only really showed like 4 or 5 samples.
They have number of injection attempts here. IAR. What is IAR? What does that stand for? I'm trying to find where they define it. Do they really not define what IAR is in this context? Let me just go to the beginning, see if they.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't matter.
But I mean, it might be in there. But yeah, I didn't look for the actual like median amount of samples or whatever it took to compromise it. Yeah, they keep using this IAR term. It doesn't seem very intuitive. I don't even. Yeah, the first use they don't define what it is, so kind of wish they did that, but whatever. Not too big of a deal. So yeah, I mean, overall in conclusion, I think it could practically be used, especially when you bring up that spousal example, but
Yeah, it's
definitely not
limited. Like it
yeah.
needs to be targeted. It's not something that's just like, your random person's going to be targeted by it. It really takes some intent and some planning to do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we'll move on to the next white paper, which is the MemoryRanger, preventing hijacking of the file object structure in Windows. So I will say I like this paper's formatting. Font is nice and big. I don't have to zoom in on the page to be able to read stuff easily.
You're getting old.
I know. So I just wanted to I wanted to praise it a little bit with the formatting, but some of it is worded kind of badly. And what I mean by that is this paragraph. So I'll talk a little bit about what the paper is before going into that. So it basically talks about Windows kernel memory attacks. So, once you do some memory corruption and you get, say, like an arbitrary read or write into kernel memory, this paper talks about what you can do after you get that. So I think this paper tunnels in on the file object structures. So you can basically use an arbitrary. Oh,
it
yeah,
talks about a particular attack where a driver will open a file in exclusive mode, so nothing else is supposed to be able to access that file while it's open. Like it'll lock the file. And then it talks about a way that if you get any sort of malicious code running in the kernel, running in another driver, whatever, you open, you do create file to like any other file you want, and a file object gets created. And then you go in and modify your file object with data that gets copied from your victim's file object, so that one that's open in exclusive mode. You copy over 4 attributes from that one into your file object, and then you're able to access the file.
Yeah, so
it's hijacking that file object.
So this primarily appears to be like a data-only attack. It's not compromising, instruction flow necessarily, but you're tampering with heap data to get some sort of primitive, in this case, stealing away the
you're getting access to the exclusive file.
Yeah.
So whatever sensitive data is in there is what you're getting.
So what I did want to highlight that I thought was poorly worded was they said, apart from OS kernel and drivers, kernel mode memory includes a lot of sensitive data structures which can be used by attackers, which is of course true. And then they say CPUs do not provide any security features to prevent illegal access to that memory. And that, like, when I first read that, that was confusing because, like, kernel memory is absolutely protected. But what they mean is it's not protected from itself. Like, it's not isolated. So if you have ring 0 code execution or whatever, you can do anything to any part of the kernel, where they're saying that, it should be isolated. So this driver that has this file object shouldn't be able to access another file object.
I'll also comment there, I found their use of legal and illegal just to be a little bit funny.
Their use of what, sorry?
Their use of illegal and legal. in the descriptions to be a little bit funny. I mean, it's not wrong. It just, to prevent illegal access versus, illegitimate or something. Oh no, it just read a little bit weird to me.
Yeah, illegal seems like when you think about illegal, when you hear about like kernel
Yeah.
stuff, you mainly think about like access violations. So like trying to write to non-writable memory. That's what I think of when I hear illegal. So that might be part of the what you were saying there. And yeah, and then they just go, as a result, gaining rewrite access to kernel one memory, they can, access any driver. And how Windows has tried to prevent that is through PatchGuard. But they say that PatchGuard isn't incredibly effective because it has fixed memory regions that it protects. So it detects like Microsoft drivers hijacking, but not necessarily all drivers, is what I could gather from it. And they kind of use some data from recent CVEs published in 2018 to back up that claim. And they talk about advanced persistent threats utilizing that against the Windows kernel for exploits. So Fruity Armor, which we talked about before, and Sandcat, which I think we also talked about before.
I think we talked about both of them at the same time.
Did we? Were they released at the same time?
I don't remember for sure. I think they might have mentioned the same report. Doesn't matter.
Okay. So anyway, they talk about these attacks, but they propose their solution to it, and they call it MemoryRanger. And it does quite a few things. From what I can gather, it basically hooks kernel API calls.
It does a lot. I'm just going to say right front. The solution is, let's add a hypervisor.
Yeah.
That's the solution.
It's hypervisor based.
Run every driver in an isolated area. I add that isolation. I know hypervisors are all the rage, but everything does not need to be solved with a hypervisor.
What do you mean? How can you say that?
No. I mean, in fact, I think the hypervisors really should be our last line of defense, not our go-to defense for everything. So as much as this isn't going to catch on. I really doubt it'll catch on.
Well, here's one thing I did want to highlight. It says that it tracks memory accesses. So all forms, read, write, execute, and they have extended page tables for each like new driver that gets initialized, and they basically prevent attacks from one driver hitting the memory of another by using the extended page tables. But my problem with that is, if you're tracking all these read-write memory calls and execute calls, and you're hooking the kernel API calls and everything, that sounds like a lot of potential overhead and performance hit. And
I don't recall
they don't talk about
performance. Yeah, I didn't think so.
I mean, they talk about it a little bit. They have this quote,
but not in sufficient detail.
Oh no, they literally have one sentence. It says the processing experiments on Windows 10 have shown that developed updated MemoryRanger, that is weird, worded really weirdly. It says it causes acceptable performance degradation. What's acceptable? Like, there's no numbers at all about like any benchmarks of the performance hit. Like,
given the Intel performance hits from the micro-architectural stuff, I guess 40% is probably fair.
I mean, acceptable can mean a lot of things in different cases. Like, for me, I don't really do too much CPU intensive stuff or anything like that. So maybe it would be acceptable for me. But if you're, a server, running a server, probably not so much. So I wish they had actual numbers for the overhead, and the fact that they don't kind of makes me wonder if, they're not including it on purpose because it is kind of, large overhead, and they just don't want to include that because it makes it look bad. I mean, that's a bit cynical of me, but
Well, no, but I mean, you're right. They just say acceptable. They don't include even a percentage. They include nothing. That is like, it would be better if they didn't even say acceptable. It would be better if they just didn't mention it.
Yeah.
The fact that they mention it makes me think they even thought to look at it and decided not to include that.
Yeah. So, I'm pretty skeptical just based on that.
Well, I mean, a hypervisor solution is like, a hypervisor can do a lot, but it is always introducing a fair chunk of performance hit, like a significant performance hit. I mean, not always. Like, you can have a reasonably light hypervisor, but especially when you're trying to inject this, is for this particular case. Like, all of these things kind of start adding up, where it's just not the right type of solution.
Yeah, exactly. One final thing I did want to hit on that they talked about was they have this future plans section. And the first thing they have is prevent process privilege escalation. And what they talk about is that most drivers, they say, or at least the drivers they've looked at, don't really mess with the e-process structure. So that includes, I don't really do Windows stuff, but I think that's similar to like the thread structure in Linux, right? It holds the process credentials, tokens, all that kind of stuff is stored in that structure. So they're essentially proposing blocking drivers from tampering with the process structures. But what I wonder is if there are legitimate cases where that's used, you know? Like
Yeah,
if that
that I
would
don't know
cause.
offhand, so I can't
Yeah.
actually comment on it. But I mean,
I
there
mean,
most likely are legitimate reasons for it.
it probably like antiviruses and stuff probably need to be able to, tamper with that structure. Um, I mean, yeah, it's just I think this little portion would be interesting to get more information on, because if you could block the if you could
I
block
think it
the
would have been
ability to
better
access
for them
that,
to look at these types of protections rather than just jump straight to hypervisor.
I think so too. Yeah.
Like,
I
this
mean,
reads as a lot more interesting than, oh yeah, we can fix this with hypervisors. It's like, of course you can. You can fix a ton of problems with
you can do anything with
hypervisors.
that.
We know that.
Yeah, I mean, would be an interesting point of research, because if you could block that, that could be a really useful mitigation for trying to block privilege escalation. You could probably work around it, well, you could definitely work around it in different ways, but it makes it harder to do. So I think that would be an interesting area to research. I kind of wish like you said, they had more focus on those kinds of mitigations than the one they went with.
Yeah.
So yeah. So we'll move on to the Hey Google, what exactly do your security patches tell us? I must say, I really like the name play on the Hey Google prompt. So
My apologies, I don't understand.
Did you just hear that?
Yes, I did. I'm pretty sure the stream did too.
Oh my god, that was perfect.
I mean, I know it said didn't understand, but maybe you should ask it again. Maybe it'll tell us. Maybe it'll read the paper. But yeah, I kind of include this, like, just, we talked about it before with one of Google's releases, I think, that had a bunch of stats. So this just kind of touches on a lot of the same stuff, which is kind of interesting to see.
Not quite. So I did want to bring that up. So on the previous stream we did that we talked about the Android stuff, they mostly talked about vulnerability classes, areas where the vulnerabilities are. This paper seems to focus more on the logistics of the patches and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, that's where they're basing it off of, and yeah, it goes into those logistics, but it does talk about, like, 22% of the issues were failure to constrain operations to a memory buffer. It does talk about that, which was similar to the other one that we talked about.
Yeah.
Where it talks about some of those issues, but I felt like there are definitely some things lacking with how they do it. Like I said, 22% were this failure to constrain operation to memory buffer, but they also had 4% were out of bound read and 4% was out of bound write, which sounds like a failure to constrain an operation to a memory buffer.
Yeah.
But it's split out, so there are a couple issues like that which seemed a little bit weird, but it was still just some interesting statistics within this.
Yeah, I think what I found the most interesting was they said that there was a significant delay in patching when the vulnerabilities originated from either the Linux community, which I'm assuming they mean like, desktop or server, like not mobile, obviously, or when they involve certain Qualcomm components. So Qualcomm does like the SoC stuff, Snapdragon line. So, Linux. So I should say that it doesn't seem to be a fault on Linux. It seems to be a fault on Android porting Linux patches. So let me just go to the page. They had a page that actually had like statistics of, the median amount of days that it took between Linux putting out a patch and Android porting that to their code base.
I think it's still further down.
I think you're right. I didn't realize this report was actually so many pages. I wish I wrote down the page number that I found that on. Actually, I could probably, let me just see.
I think it's the next section.
I had Rabbit's not being very nice here. They had 307 days listed. So yeah, there it is. So they basically say that Qualcomm, as the mean number of days it took to patch port a patch from Qualcomm for mobile devices was 307 days, and with Linux it was 324 days, which is quite interesting because I don't see why it would be so difficult to port Linux patches to the Android code base, because it's like, it seems like it would be straightforward.
It could be straightforward, but I imagine there's just kind of I imagine kind of Android and Linux have deviated quite a bit by this point.
Yeah,
That it's not as simple as just, find the same file and do that, but like there's more to it. And especially as you consider the architectural differences too.
Yeah.
That can add to it. I still feel like that's a pretty long period of time to apply a patch. But like,
Yeah.
I could understand if you think just coming from how much has changed. But I don't even know how much has changed. Like, that's not an area I really get into, so maybe I'm overestimating it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a fair benefit of the doubt. So that seems to be like an incompetency thing. But then there was another quote they had, which seems a bit more nefarious, where they put, for 94% of patched Android vulnerabilities, the data disclosure in public data sets is not before the patch release date, which makes it seem like they're fudging the disclosure dates on the vulnerability reports. I don't know if you saw that. I thought that was pretty, like, why? You know what I mean? Like, why would they do that?
That's more saying that. Well, I'm just trying to read it here.
I don't think they go too in depth on that.
I mean, it's
They just
basically
mention
saying
it as
that
a
they're
passing point,
disclosed before the patch is released. I don't know if that's really saying they're fudging anything.
Oh, okay, wait, okay. I think I misread that. I think you're right. Yeah, the data disclosure in public data says is not before the patch release date.
Yeah, like I don't see that as nefarious.
Yeah, I think I misread it, so that's my bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to reread it a couple times to try and get what you were saying.
Yeah, some of it is, I feel like they could have worded that a bit better, but yeah, I'll take blame for that one.
You're fired. We're not doing another episode.
Ah, damn. That's why we're taking the few months break. I'm being put on leave.
Yeah, I knew this would happen.
And then the last quote that was interesting is they said that there's more attacks and vulnerabilities. So they stated in 2016, the number of publicly disclosed vulnerabilities was around 6,000, and then 2017 it went up to 14,000, and then in 2018 it went up to 16,000. So, as the years goes on, there's like way more, like it more than doubled.
Well, yes, but I think if you actually take a look further down, they talk about some of those numbers, and the 2016 numbers only included like 5 months or something.
Only included what, sorry?
5 months. It wasn't the entire year. It was like from where they started, like releasing the information or something. And like they had a little footnote basically saying like, the 1 year here is really low. Because,
if that's true.
Although maybe that was 2015.
If that is true, I feel like they should have put that next to that statement though still. Because that is an important note that should be kept close by.
Okay, this is where I was thinking of it. It's somewhere around here.
Okay.
But it's a different number.
Yeah, 2015, the number of patched vulnerabilities is only for 5 months. Yeah, 2015.
Yeah, so that's not the same, but it's also a different number of vulnerabilities than what we were seeing up there. So it's talking about something different too.
Oh, okay.
Still, I mean, mobile is definitely being attacked more often. I mean, 2017 seems like it was the highest. Like, you kind of had that peak there, but this is only covering, 5 years, not even.
Yeah. I mean, Android has always been a little bit behind security in the mobile area. And
Well,
from
I mean, there's
iOS.
only Apple and Android. Like, being behind is being behind Apple, who has really been on top of the game.
Yeah. Well, the biggest issue, and this paper also touches on it, is the software update things, which Google is trying to fix.
Yeah.
But like software updates in Android is not streamlined by any means, whereas Apple, it's very streamlined. So,
Well, that kind of comes down. Apple has the benefit of knowing all the hardware, making all the hardware.
yeah, yeah, they don't have to deal with vendors like Samsung and
Yeah.
Huawei and
Like,
all
there's
these.
definitely a bigger challenge for Google with Android and doing that than with Apple. Apple's definitely used that to their advantage, though.
Yeah. So that's one thing with Android is end day vulnerabilities are a lot more valuable than they are on iOS. So this talks mostly about 0 days, right? Like new vulnerability discoveries. So when you combine that, there's so many being found, and they talk about the security issues, and then you combine that with how much more effective end days are. Um, I think there definitely needs to be a lot more focus on Android. So I kind of like this paper talking about the logistics of vulnerability patching and stuff like that, because you know I've said it before on previous podcasts. People are very willing, like enthusiastic to try to air other companies out to dry, like Apple for their vulnerability patches. I think they've had some bad patches before where they were patched incompletely, and an exploit could go around the patch they did, and they got under fire for that. And Google seems to be, people aren't as willing to go after them for their vulnerability patching and stuff like that.
I think
So
Google has had a lot of goodwill towards them.
a lot of
Like,
what, sorry?
a lot of goodwill towards them.
Yeah.
Like, Google has kind of been that, that favorite company or the special company that's always been treated pretty well by people. Everybody's always like that, but that goodwill has been disappearing in the last several years. That's been eroding, and we're seeing more hate driven towards Google, especially since they removed the do no evil from there.
Yeah.
Really, like, I mean, that wasn't the turning point by any means, but that was around when I think a lot of the goodwill that was had towards Google as being kind of this almost an underdog. I mean, they weren't really, but I don't know. There was a lot of, like, Google was always kind of the fan favorite. People liked Google as a company, and
Yeah.
that's changing.
Yeah, I think more people need to start looking at Google stuff and start, giving them the same amount of scrutiny that people are giving Apple. Because there are definitely issues and potentially more issues, and I think they've just been kind of avoided and not really talked about because, people have a bit of a bias against Apple in terms of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like obviously, there's Google's Project Zero, which I love to talk about, is how they always look at WebKit and iOS and OSX and all of
Yeah,
Apple's
but I
stuff,
mean,
but
there's a
none
very
of Google stuff.
clear motivation for that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't entirely blame them. Like, I mean, it's their company. Like, Google's going to publicize against their rival company. It makes sense.
But there's no teams really that are able to do it against Google. Like there isn't really any other teams like Project Zero that are going after Google products. And I think
There
that
aren't a
needs
lot
to
of teams
change.
like Project Zero, period. Apple could start a
Exactly.
team like that.
They won't.
No,
They
they
don't
won't.
care.
But they could.
They could, yeah. But I mean,
Um,
we need more teams like Project Zero. I don't know if we'll get them. We probably won't. But if there is another team like Project Zero, it needs to be the opposite. They need to be going against Google stuff.
to be fair, I'm sure Project Zero also targets Google stuff. Like, I'm sure that Google still fuzzes their own stuff.
Oh, it's just not
It's just
publicized.
they don't publicize those issues when they find it. Yeah.
But I think they need some of that public pressure where Apple's getting it. I think Google is going to need to start getting it too, to kind of kickstart their security towards the direction that Apple's going, if that makes
I don't know.
sense.
I mean, I think Google has been taking some of the right steps lately. Like, we've
They've been
talked
taking
about some of the
steps.
changes in Android and stuff. I can't. I mean, yeah, they're not as well defended as Apple, but they are taking some of the right steps. I don't really fault Google on that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, yeah, we've talked about it a bit before, even whether that transparency report we were talking about a little bit earlier was really nice. And like, I don't think iOS has anything like that published because Apple's really tight on their security too. So, I mean, yeah,
Apple's
Google
tight
has
on
some,
everything.
yeah. So Google has some good things going for it. That's true. I just think it needs more public attention. So that's pretty much where I'll leave that. So do we want to move on to talking about OSX Gatekeeper?
Just before we touch on that, I will just say, because we haven't, from uh, the reported issues, like as mentioned, 22% were a failure to constrain operations to a memory buffer. And then they had like the 2 that were out of bound read and write, which sounded really familiar. But like their big 4 issues that they patched were the failure to constrain, info exposure, access control, and improper input validation. Like there feels like a lot of overlap in there. But I did just want to point out that those were their big 4. Over 50% of the issues fell into that category.
Okay. Before we move into the OSX, I just noticed in the chat by Dibma, there's a message saying, "Is an Apple strength its marketing and image?" Absolutely. Like that is a big part of their brand. Is the Apple brand is like their major selling
I don't
point.
think anyone buys Apple because of the security aspect, but because they do everything in-house. Like they build their own chips, they do all of that in-house. They're able to be very tight-lipped about stuff, and they're able to because they have such a hard control over all the hardware and everything, they're able to do a lot of the security really easily. They're able to implement that into the whole pipeline, and it's there, it's seamless. They're just able to do it. Like that's just the strength of how Apple works. But it's not really part of their marketing. Like nobody's really buying it because I mean, maybe it is pointed out a bit. But
yeah, I was gonna say, like, I remember when there was that big law enforcement case where the FBI was trying to get into a phone. They did push like their privacy stuff. They do try to push that a little bit into the marketing aspect of how everything's encrypted and the security of their phones now it's locked down. They do market it a little bit, but not nearly as much as the image.
Yeah, like generally, like if people are buying the iPhone, it's usually the security isn't what they're thinking about. It is the whole brand that Apple has developed. That said, I will actually say, like, there's also the whole idea that, OSX doesn't get viruses. For a long time, the MacBooks were just virus-free and everything. That was part, like, not necessarily, I don't know if that was really in their marketing, but that was part of the general view on Apple. So maybe I'm wrong about commenting on the security. That said, I mean, I'm really just arguing here that Apple has a huge advantage because of how much control they have over the entire process, that they're able to implement a lot of security that just isn't really that feasible for Android when they have to support, all of these different OEMs.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing I do want to say is, even though it's not like necessarily part of their marketing, in terms of mobile, iOS security is super strong. Their biggest security point is probably their sandboxing. Their sandboxing is insane. The amount of attack surface you have from, let's say, the browser, for example, is super limited compared to a lot of other products. But as I'm going to touch on in this article, they kind of neglect OSX, which we've talked about in the past, or at least in my opinion, they seem to, they focus
OSX
a lot of their
definitely
security on it.
isn't. Like iOS has gotten a lot of attention. I think part of that's just because they didn't have as much history with it. They were able to build something new and do security from the beginning. That wasn't so much the case with OSX.
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about that here, because so this Gatekeeper bypass was published on the 24th of May, and so Gatekeeper, for those of you who don't have Macs or aren't familiar with the term, it's basically that pop-up you get. So if you try to install an application that's not from the App Store, it's not signed by Apple, you'll get a prompt saying, "This isn't from the Apple Store. Do you still want to install it?" And Gatekeeper is basically responsible for that. But two major design points for Gatekeeper is it considers programs from external drives and network shares to be safe, and so they don't prompt for that. I don't think. At
Yeah,
least
and I
that's what
mean
this page
that's
prompts.
what they say, and that was like as soon as I saw that, I knew where this was going.
Yeah. So they basically combined those to do an attack. So the
Yeah.
scenario they give is
Well, so they combine that, but I think the actual attack here is zip files. When you unzip a file, um, the file names can basically be whatever you want them to be, or the files can point. They can be a shortcut. They can be a symlink. They can point to other places. When you extract the file, and then you have like a shortcut or a symlink, it just points to another file. So this is really common in web apps where they'll extract a zip automatically. You'll include like either a file name like dot dot slash dot dot slash. You'll do directory traversal and the file and overwrite like some other file when it extracts it, because it's just like, okay, let's just put that path in. The other thing though that you can do is have it extract with a symlink, so it'll give you access to like Etsy password. So it's really common in web attacks to do this with zips. So in this case, you do a symlink, but you point it to this slash net your attack domain.com, and then like have it set up on a share on that domain. And thanks to AutoFS or AutoMountFS, it'll automatically mount your share on like a remote domain, and it'll just trust it because it's a share.
Yeah. So it's more of like an architectural design flaw than it is like a like a low level bug. So the funny thing is where I wanted to jump into the discussion where Apple doesn't seem to really care too much about the OSX security as opposed to iOS. They stated that the vendor was contacted on February 22nd, and the issue was supposed to be addressed on May 15th, and then Apple just started dropping their emails. So it seems to still be a 0 day. The workaround that they put out is basically just to disable auto mount. So I guess if you don't need auto mount, that's a fair
Which I
workaround.
feel like most people really don't.
Yeah, that's
That
probably
said,
a
I
good
guess in a
workaround.
business environment, it might be a little bit more common to use it.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, this is another one of those things where it takes a little bit of social engineering to kind of get there. But I mean, it's still a very reasonable attack. It's really easy to pull off.
I mean because it's not like just a simple bug that you can apply a patch for. I do, playing devil's advocate, I can see it being a little bit more difficult to deal with, because it is a design flaw. So like, how do you really fix it, right?
I mean, I
Well,
think
you
the
can disable
biggest thing
auto
would
mount,
just be,
but
disable mounting of remote, like non-local network stuff, so internet.
or at least make it a permission that's by default disabled or something like
Yeah,
that.
like I mean, it would be one thing to automatically mount a network share. It's a lot less common, I think, to mount a domain, like a completely remote domain.
Yeah.
But I mean, uh, there's we talked about another issue that involved setting up a share like that, didn't we? A little while back.
I
Like a
I feel like
couple.
we did, but I can't remember what it was.
It
So
was the Qt plugins. You could do the plugin path to a
oh
network
yeah,
share.
okay, yeah, that's right.
So I think this really comes down to an issue with shares over the internet, which I don't think are really used too often. Maybe somebody will probably come and correct me and tell me about how it's super important we have that, but that just seems like a feature that isn't necessary. Or that, could be behind an extra permission. Maybe not isn't necessary, I could imagine. Because I've done like SSH, FS before.
Yeah,
So like I could understand a use for it. Just, locking it behind an additional permission to actually communicate outside of the local network.
yeah.
Although that wouldn't necessarily be something that OSX does. I'm not sure if AutoMountFS is part of OSX or if that's just the default program like that's included.
Yeah. And another potential patch point they mention here is the software that's responsible for decompressing the zip files don't perform checks on the symlinks. So that would be another point. Would be
I mean,
um,
that's also kind of a feature of zip files to have those symlinks. So the fact that a zip file has them,
Yeah, I guess you
like,
can't really. I was gonna say maybe you could blacklist certain ones, but it seems like with this kind of attack, you could. That wouldn't be
no, I think that's the wrong
effective.
layer. I mean, yes, when you're like on web apps, we definitely tell people like, check for symlinks, check for directory traversals in the names as you're looping through the zip. Like that's a protection. But in this case, it's just a generic zip handler that'll extract the files.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it's part of zip files.
Yeah, you'd break some
Use the
features
tar.
doing that.
I don't
So.
actually know if tar supported or not. They might.
Yeah. So it seems, at least at the moment, this is a 0 day. So we can keep up that mantle of having a 0 day. Have we had one every episode?
I'm
I
actually
don't
not
know.
sure. I mean, we've always had
Uh,
exploits, but not. I'm not sure about unpatched exploits.
yeah. So at least this episode has an unpatched exploit. And then the final page that we have up for the day. We're not going to talk about it too much. Just kind of
Yeah,
bring it up.
this is
Is
more
the
just
Z
sharing an
report.
interesting little write up. I thought it was just a fun write up, just because their exploit technique, they chose to, rather than just using like a, say, had execution to do like a ROP chain or something, they chose to search memory and basically just disable safe mode. And this is a kind of classic technique out of Write Once Pwn Anywhere, old. Well, I guess it's not that old, like 2014 Black Hat, I think. But
Yeah.
they chose to do that, enable good old ActiveX objects on the page, and then you get your code execution through the scripting engine. It's just kind of a fun little write-off. I think you had some things you actually want to talk about from it, though.
I just wanted to say that, as far as browser exploits go, let me just go to the POC, not the full POC, just the one they had. It seems to, unless I misread something, it seems to be like purely a DOM exploit, pretty much, and it does it through VB script. So the rabbit's kind of freaking out on me here, and I can't really read what that says because the text is blurry. But
Yeah, I
it
can't read that either, actually.
goddamn rabbit. But yeah, it seems to be like a more simple browser exploit than a lot of the ones that I've seen. I didn't want to go too in depth on it. I just thought that that was an interesting
Yeah,
point.
I mean, this is a write-up. If you want to read it, go actually read it from them, not us trying to summarize it. Which
Yeah.
is definitely what I recommend. To go take a look at this write-up.
And another thing I will say is this does seem to me more of like a fun thing. It's probably not something you would see weaponized in the wild because it's Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer is pretty much dead. It has to, it has to be IE8 or lower for the emulation level. I mean, it's not really practical. You know what I mean? Like most people who used to use Internet Explorer probably using Edge now, or Chrome. Like Internet
I
Explorer,
know some
very
of the
small user
local
base.
government here still uses IE6.
Really? Okay. So
IE6 is
maybe
still mandated for some of them, yeah.
that's sad. But okay, so maybe it is a little bit more practical than I thought. But yeah, just if you're interested in browser exploits, it looks like a pretty cool write-up, talking about like DOM methods and stuff like that, and fast paths, which is like the big thing in browser exploitation. So if you're interested in that, definitely take a look at that write-up. It looks to be fairly accessible, as in it doesn't look like you have to have too much of a background in browser exploitation to be able to read it. So yeah, we'll have that in the description below. Z just wanted to bring that up. And
Just including it has something worth reading.
yeah, so yeah, that's pretty much all the topics that we wanted to cover on this.
I will
this
remind
podcast.
everybody that we will be gone now for several months, likely until at least November.
Yeah. Though we do plan to put out other media.
Yeah, just not this particular weekly stream.
Yeah, I mean, I may do 1 or 2 episodes just where like after DEF CON, because I'm planning on going to DEF CON this year. So, if I have some thoughts on that, I might stream that, because I think it would be an interesting discussion. Although I'd be monologuing because you're obviously not going to DEF CON. So Yeah, so I might
just-
do a stream or
just
two,
want
but
to
it
toss
just
that reminder in there, though. No, we aren't going to be back next
Yeah, it
week,
won't be,
unfortunately.
like,
We will
consistently
be back.
happening.
We're not done with the podcast. It's
Yeah.
just not in the immediate future.
Yeah. So yeah, that'll be our last podcast for a little while, and yeah, so we'll see you guys probably. So you said around November, right?
That would be my guess. Yeah, obviously I'm walking a fair distance. Might take a little longer, a little shorter.
Probably sprain your leg again, whatever. Be back here in a couple, maybe only
Back in
2
a
months.
week.
Who knows? Back in a week, yeah.
Yeah, surprise! We're actually doing the podcast still.
Yeah. So just monitor our Twitter for updates. Our Twitter is right in the image right now at Day06. So you can check our Twitter. We'll have updates there regarding when the podcast will be back.
Yeah, and I imagine when we come back, we're actually going to take it a bit more seriously and try and publicize it a bit more. So hopefully you'll just hear about it anyhow.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so we'll see you guys when we're back.